Hello, in this video I'm going to be demonstrating the installation of Ricochet's half-inch UHMW on a 2017 Polaris RZR 900S. The belly skids should be the same for all of the 900s minus the 4-seater, whether it be an S model or an XP. Those come, it's the A-arms that are wider, so all the belly skids should be the same. So this should apply to pretty much all the RZR 900s. The first thing you need to do is to remove all the factory plastic. That's already been taken care of on this machine. So once you have all the factory stuff removed, then you can go ahead and start installing your Ricochet set. We're going to start with this one plate. It's marked the 793 M1. And before you get that plate hung into position, you're going to want to mount or hang your 1-inch clamps, the outboard ones, on the frame first. It's almost impossible to get those around that tube clamp if you have the skid in position. Don't worry about getting them lined up or the spacing or anything like that. Just get them so they'll just slide around the bar and then stay up there by themselves. And then you can come in and line them up with the slot to get the bolt started. So we're going to do the same thing here on both sides. And it's just the outer two. You don't need to worry about the one up here. The one up here, you got plenty of room. It's just this floorboard so close, it just kind of takes up all your room to work. So once you get those hung up and in place, then you can take your plate and get it set into position. And we're gonna start by hanging it just by this cup washer and this 6x16 flange bolt. And that's just picking up a factory location mount. Okay, so we've got that in place. Now we can come out here to our clamps that we hung and slide those up the bar, get them lined up with the mounting slot and start the bolt. And all these bolts we are going to leave loose for now, just for adjustment. After we get all of the plates mounted, then we will go through and secure all those down. So those are those two. We're going to come do the same thing to the other side. And you're going to want to put anti-seize in all these bolts as well. Not necessarily the 6mm bolts or smaller bolts, but all of the larger, the 8mm bolts, they all need anti-seize. Okay, so that takes care of those. Now we can come and do these mounts, and for the inboard ones, you can just reach up and around the frame and get those going. There's nothing that's really going to hang you up there. You got plenty of room to work on that one. It's just the outboard ones are a little tight. Now we've got all these 1 1/4 clamps. One's up top, it's 1 1/4 down below. And those you can just slide through the access hole and get it around the frame tube. Okay, so that takes care of all the mounting clamps for that plate. Now before we move on to the next plate, we've got a bar bracket that's got some double-sided tape on it, and I've already got it installed on this machine. But it's going to go up on this cross member right here. You've got these 4 holes. The outer 2 are picking up a common mount. Well, there's no thread in the frame in these 2 holes. So you're going to take that bar clamp, peel off the tape, make sure your frame's clean, and you're just going to kind of use the holes in this as a guide. You know, you want to make sure that you're pretty centered on the existing holes, you know, the factory threads with these holes. If you're pretty centered on that, then you can go ahead and stick your plate down and kind of just, you know, center it up with these holes there. You want to do that before you put this plate on, because you just can't get in there to get that bracket in place. And the tape's only holding the bracket in place in order for you to get the bolts started. It's pretty much impossible to get those bolts started without that bracket. So, okay, so after you get that bracket installed, there's 2 more clamps that you need to hang. It's just a little tricky on this side because you got the fuel tank over here. So I want to try and get these hung before you get the other plate on. This makes it a little easier to get them all started where they need to be. Pry that plate down a little bit. Okay, so you got those 2 clamps hung on the passenger side. The driver's side, you don't have to do that. It's a lot more open. You don't have the fuel tank, so that's not an issue. There are 2 more clamps you're going to want to hang before you get the plate started, though. It's going to be the largest of your clamps. They're going to be stamped with a B mark on them. And they're going to go right back here, right underneath the weldment for the engine mount. There's a little slot that is just going to kind of slide through. You'll see it, it's pretty apparent. But you want to get those on first, because otherwise you're going to have a hard time getting those into place as well. So now that we have all of the clamps hung, we can actually go ahead and put on the plate itself. And this plate is going to slide up underneath this. You can see where it's been milled and relieved. It's going to made up with that. They're picking up these 4 mounts as a common mount there. So get your plate up into position. Kind of be careful with these clamps. You don't knock them off. Perfect. Make sure you're slid up underneath. Line up the slots. I'm actually going to start one of these back clamps just to kind of support this plate. There we are. Do the other 2 cup washers, and this is where that bracket was. And as you can see, there's no way you're going to get your hand in there to hold it in place. So that's the whole point of that double-sided tape, just to hold that bracket so you can catch the thread. As you can see, it catches pretty easy. Just make sure you get that bracket lined up the best you possibly can. I mean, it's got some room to float, so you don't need to be dead on. I'm going to line up these two outer clamps here that we've already hung. And again, everything's staying loose. Do this other clamp back here. And that gives us our two clamps here. And like I say, these, you've got enough clearance. And, don't lose your spacers. Take your clamp, slide it through the hole, get it around the frame, and then slide it over to line up with the slot. Okay, so that gives us 4 more mounts for this plate here. And those are going to be, instead of clamps, it's going to be nut plates. And you have 2 of them that have a longer bolt and an aluminum spacer. The ones with the longer bolt and this aluminum spacer are going to go inboard. So slide the spacer between the skid plate and the frame, and then you put the nut plate on top and start your bolt. And then the one with the shorter bolt and without the aluminum spacer is the outboard hole. Okay, so that takes care of the center plate. All the hardware started there. So now I can move on to the rear. And before you set the rear plate into position, you got a couple more clamps you're going to want to hang first. And what I usually do is I will get them around the tube and kind of get them to rest on that little channel there, and that way you don't have to worry about them falling down or whatnot, they'll still stay put. And then when you get your plate on, then you can slide them into position. So let's take this plate here, 10mm socket. And it's going to slide underneath just like the other plates did. These are all picking up factory mounts, so again, there's no drilling on this set at all. Okay, that takes care of those. 3 front. Now we can go ahead and start the bolts for the clamps that we've already hung. Okay, now before I do the rear on these, I actually do like to kind of snug up these front cup washers just a little bit. As you can see, the plates just got, you know, sliding back or whatnot just through the adjustability. So just kind of snug these up. It doesn't take much. We're not going to tighten them yet, so you can still move the plate if you need to, but it'll just hold it in a more realistic position of where it's actually going to be once it's mounted. So then we have the rear mounts here, and we've got spacers with these. You're going to take the nut plate and you're going to drop it into the frame just kind of right behind the CV axle here, and then it's kind of like that other aluminum spacer that we had in between the plate and the frame. And then it's just a matter of lining it up and catching the thread. It's kind of hard to see. You're working by braille a little bit on that one, but just slide it around, it'll fall in. Again, drop the nut plate into the frame. It'll kind of just drop in and almost really kind of slide back where it needs to be. So you don't have to worry about fishing around for it too much. Get that spacer into place. There it goes. Okay, so that is all the hardware started. So at this point you can go through and you know, just double check the alignment of everything, make sure it's all kind of, you know, butted up pretty nice where you want it, square to the machine. And if you're happy with it, you can go ahead and tighten down all the cup washers at this point. And the cup washers, these 6mm bolts, do not use a impact or an air ratchet or anything on them. It's just too easy to break the bolts or even strip out the threads on the frame. So just, you know, get them tight, but just, you know, with a hand tool. Don't kill them, you know, just a reasonable amount of torque, nothing excessive. sure all the cup washers are seating down flush in their counter bores. Okay, so that's all the cup washers. And for all these 8mm, I am going to use an air ratchet on these. I recommend using a hand tool, but as long as you don't go crazy, air ratchet's probably okay. And I'm just going to start from the rear and work my way up. You can go either way, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so that takes care of all the belly plates there. That gives us one more plate to install, is the very top plate. Okay, so that just leaves us the top plate to mount here. It mounts via our bar clamp in the rear, and then it's picking up the factory holes up front. Now the front factory holes are not threaded by Polaris. They're dimpled, but they don't have a thread in them. So we're actually supplying you with a 6mm self-tapping bolt. A lot of times it's actually easier to take your bolt and cut the thread before you have the plate installed. I've already done it on this machine, but like I say, you can just take your bolt, you know, get it in there, you know, keep it square, and just turn it as you're cutting the thread. As soon as it frees up, you've made it through, and go ahead and back it out. Do that with both of them. I found it's a little bit easier to do that before actually mounting the plate. That way the plate isn't, you know, kind of flopping around and you're not dealing with all that. So like I say, they're already done on this machine. But anyways, you're going to take your bar clamp that we're providing, and it's going to slide down in the frame right here. And I'm just going to start these by hand, and you know, again, we're leaving it loose. You take your bar clamp, you're going to line it up with your mounting slots and run your bolts through. Start your thread. Okay, now everything's all started. You can see the plate still moves around. It's got plenty of adjustability. So just get it squared up, you know, for the best fit and whatnot. And then go ahead and tighten your front mounts first. And again, do not use an impact or an air ratchet on these. They're way too easy to strip out. Just, you know, get them snug, tight. Don't kill them though. See, it's really easy to strip those dimpled threads out. So you want to be careful with those. Just like I say, don't over tighten them. Just get them tight. And then you can come through and tighten up the rear bolts. And that is the Ricochet UHMW 1/2 inch on a RZR 900. There's no drilling on this installation whatsoever. It's all strictly bolt-on. Really, it should be able to be done in probably an hour or so. But yeah, like I say, pretty straightforward installation. Should be a good set for you and your machine. Thanks for watching.